Hello, welcome to And You Know This. I'm your host, Katura Kendrick, and here's what I believe. I believe that not only does your life already know what it wants, it has always known what you need. And all you have to do is just get real good at silencing all of the noise, all of the voices that surround us so you can actually hear your life speaking and then give it what it has always known that it's needed. And my guest today is living, breathing proof of that. I am so geeked to have with me the Ro Peña. How you doing, Ro?
I'm good. Thank you, Couture, for having me. Appreciate it.
And you already know, I feel humbled. I don't know if you do know this, but I feel humbled that you agreed to have this conversation with me. And as we keep talking, that'll probably come up more, and I'll probably explain that even in more detail. But before we get into your business and the tea, tell us, Ro, who you are and what brings you joy.
Well, hi, my name is Ro Peña. I use they, them pronouns. I'm an Afro-Caribbean Dominican. I'm from Washington Heights in New York City. I'm an educator. I'm a community organizer. I am a partner. I'm a sibling. I am someone's child. I am a friend. Um, I am still becoming me. Still understanding all the facets of who I am.
Beautiful. Listen, I'll be 50 in about two years, and I'm still becoming me. Wish me well on. You are also, Ro, my former eighth grader. One of my favorite former eighth graders, and taught me so much. Yes, I was early into my career when you were in my class, and I learned so much from your sincerity, your honesty. Very bright person, who I knew would soar without a question. But I bring that up because part of the reason why I wanted to have you here is because one, owe you an apology because who you are now and who you are becoming, I sensed when you were in eighth grade, but I and your other teachers didn't have a language or a context for who you were becoming. Um, so I'm not going to name the school, but we were at an all girls school here in New York City. And because of that, there were many things about the school that, when I reflect, was quite problematic. But I recall you and several of your classmates over the years, because this was an all girls school and we were so very proud of all of our girls are graduating and they're going to go on to college and they're going to have, a good, happy, middle class American life. Yay. And we did that, right? We forced you into this box of girlhood. And as I told you before, I can think of several people who we kept trying to shove in this box of girlhood and not being aware of that you weren't this prototype for what we believed students were. Either you were a boy student or a girl student, and we're all here at this girls' school. So there is a box that we want to get you into. So I want to start off by asking you if you can explain what that looked like for you, because you were at this school up until senior year. You graduated from it. So if you're able to articulate what being forced into the box of girlhood looked like when you were in middle and high school, at a school that had all girls, what that looked like and what it felt like in your body.
I think for me, it wasn't just being at the school itself, but it was all of society. So this was obviously because we live in such a binary society, especially at least in Western society, that this is the case. Especially in the United States, that is the case. I think for me, I also didn't have the language, so um the I didn't have the burden that I might have felt had I been in a school with many other children of different genders. Than the fortunate reality that I was in a place where people still had love for who I was just as an individual. So I think because I lacked the language, I understood that I felt a little different, at least when I was perceiving others. But I'd also say that everyone at that time, when you're in middle school, you are just like, I am othered. I'm feeling othered. I am not of this. I am. So I just assumed in retrospect, I assumed that that was just the reality of being a teenager or, a middle schooler being in the middle school. Um, and I think I felt, I would say that it was more towards high school where I was like, oh, this isn't feeling right. There was also like the combination of like my sexuality in general that also played a hand in understanding like, oh, I'm not like gravitating towards feeling attracted to boys in the same way that other um kids in the school were. Um, and so I think, all that to say, I feel fortunate that I was at that school, that I was taken care of in many ways, and that I didn't feel as a child boxed in that way because I understood myself as an individual. Um, and so I'm thankful for that as my personal experience. But I can understand as the adults observing me that that might have been your experience on feeling like this kid doesn't quite align with girlhood in that way. I will say that my Latinidad also um, is so deeply linked to girlhood, especially because Latina folk, not to generalize, um, we're not a monolith, but in that same idea that when we speak with other folks who are of Latina, um, in the Latina culture, like they have this idea of what femininity is, what girlhood is, what the steps are into becoming a woman. Um, and many ways I rejected that. Um,
Can I
but
pause for a quick second? If you don't mind digging into a bit more. Because I must say your maturity as you reflect on it, I think is quite fascinating and impressive. Because you were saying that in middle school, you just associated those feelings to, well, everybody sitting at my lunch table feels out of sorts. So maybe that's maybe just how things are rolling, right? But you were saying from your Latina dad culture, you rejected notions of femininity. Can you give me sort of a bit more on what that looked like
yeah,
outside of school, and just in Washington Heights, right?
yeah. So I think just in general, um, what I chose to wear was very counterculture. Um, I will say I was very into like I had my moments where I was very into what people would say that's white people mean. So I was very into that, and so I already combating so many other layers of things that were not what being a Dominican girl was like in Washington Heights. I loved my sweats. If I could have my gym uniform on every day, like that was my vibe. I
I remember.
hated I hated that incredibly long pleated skirt. Like I just couldn't. Um, but then in that same vein, there were absolutely moments where I was like, "Oh, look at me! Like I'm gonna be hot. I'm gonna be rolling up my skirt like other people." Like in an ungodly amount of rolls. Like so. Then also that right, like this idea that it's not just like me diving into my masculine part, but also like I was playing. Like I was just experiencing my gender or my body's experience of my gender expression in whatever iteration and whatever ebb and flow it felt. Um, I think but going back to this idea of like me rejecting some of the Latinidad idea of girlhood is this idea that like I just, well, it says I raise my hands.
Yeah. I'm like, you can talk, Ro. We're not in class anymore. You know, and you're grown now. You don't have to.
My mother, who is just like the best, and is really understanding who I am becoming and still who I have always been really, um, really wanted me to have a quinceañera. And I was going to other girls as quinceañera, other girls, you see the language incorrectly, but for myself now. other folks' quinceañeras all the time. And I really didn't want that. The idea of like being in a dress in front of everyone, dancing and having to dance with a boy like that, just like, and my mother, who unfortunately didn't have the opportunity to have one, really wanted to throw me one because she could have. And I just didn't, that felt so outside of my scope of wanting that, and I could not do that. Um, yeah, I
Mhm.
think that's, yeah.
All right. I appreciate that. And I can understand how you can have sort of duality. You're like, I know I'm not really in this feminine role. And also, while I see all of the people around me who have been assigned the role of girls, sort of being sexy and hot when they reach a certain age, I'm gonna play along with this too. I do think that is sort of the complications of probably young adulthood and adolescence, and also of being human. So I appreciate your saying that. So if we can clarify, and you don't mind. So how do you identify now? Because you mentioned sexuality as well. So if you had to say, this is who I am as a person, my gender or my identity in sexuality, how would you say that?
I'm a non-binary lesbian who is also identified as queer. So I use queer, non-binary under the umbrella of trans. Although I don't specifically use the term trans for myself, but I recognize that non-binary is underneath that umbrella. And and as a lesbian, and I think I think that's important for me because of um of the it feels right is the best way I can say it. Is like it just that is actually me, um, a queer lesbian non-binary person.
I love it. It feels right. And that's all that matters. Like you kind of struggle to find a way to explain it. You're like, all I got is feels right. And that's literally all that matters. This I say it feels right saying this about who I am. So again, I appreciate that. Um, so can you explain to us the journey to because are you 30 yet, bro?
I am 31, about to be 32.
That's lies. I know. So 30, almost 32-year-old Ro, I'm going to assume has a better grasp on being a non-binary lesbian who also identifies as queer, correct?
I don't know about better, but
But oh, really? Tell me more about that because
this in the same way that every day I learn about other people and I learn about other people's experiences, and I constantly get the opportunity to reflect and really understand like all the other ways that people can identify, the ways that we do put ourselves in boxes, the way that we should reject those boxes. Um, it's just so complicated. And I think it's a beautiful, complicated thing to exist and be and like find community through commonality, but also such a beautiful thing to be such an individual. Um, outside of all of the other categories I'm placed into.
mm. So the road to this then now, your understanding that it's complicated, that like you said at the beginning when you introduced yourself, you are still becoming. And I think beautifully said that you start to look at how so many people identify and all the possibilities of how to be, that your journey and progression could shift or expand even greater, even in the next few years.
A bunch of unlearning. Absolutely. Like I'm unlearning all of the things I had been taught to believe about who I was.
Oh, please tell
Uh,
me more.
like this unlearning the idea of like how to be someone's child, how to be, you know, how to take care of others in the ways that, especially people who are raised as females, they're constantly taught to take them, to take their needs and remove them from the needs of the people in their communities. Like unlearning that is something that is so connected to, for me, Latinidad and for this idea of womanhood.
Mm.
Um,
And if I can ask for clarification, because I think I know we talked before about how you were following my blog and you have followed some of my writing, which I think is very heartwarming now. But when you were my student, I was like, oh Lord Jesus. So as you know, I sort of this is like my beat. I delve into this quite often in what I write and create content about. Are you saying that you're unlearning that as a person who was assigned female or who was given this identity of what it meant to be a Dominican female, that part of that is as a woman and a female, you are expected to center everyone else except you, or are you saying the opposite?
And center everyone else except you. Yeah, take care of those in your community except yourself. Or if you do, don't do it in such a loud way. Don't do it in such a way that you're like the center at any point. Um, you know, other than when you become the matriarch and you're old, and then that is when you are the center. Like, but that's when you've done your time, and therefore now people can pour into you. That is so, I don't know. It's just not
It's
sustainable.
it's so crazy to me how much cultures are alike in that specific way. Because especially if you are I can even say non-white or white, like literally all around the world, women have been, oh, if you're assigned that and you feel and identify in that as that, or if you're assigned that and eventually start to say, well, I feel it's a bit more complicated than that. But if you have been assigned female and you are given this role of girlhood and womanhood, that seems to be the identifying trait of it. Like as you know, I lived in Asia, I lived in Africa, I'm from America. And I cannot find any culture where a woman has not had to try to unlearn that very thing if she chose to do it. Most of the time, women don't even realize that's what they're doing and they accept it. But that common trait, it's so sad to me. That's why I asked for clarification because I thought you were saying the opposite. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, hold on.
Yeah. I will say that, I'm sure that there are cultures, that, you know, matriarchs are at the center. We just are not taught those cultures, and
Mhm.
or they've been erased, or, you know, it is counterintuitive for how we live for us to know about those cultures.
Very well said. Very well said. So, as you are still trying to unlearn so many things, how to be someone's child, how to still be a part of a community without having to sacrifice your whole entire being, centering yourself out loud, how has that looked in becoming you? Has it been kind of rocky? Have you had to respectfully distance yourself from some people who are expecting you to still follow the tow line until you're an 80-year-old grandma? like how has that process been?
I think I am and have nearly always been in the fortunate position to have surrounded myself with people in my community who have uplifted me, my work, my ideals, and have challenged me in ways to help, again, that whole reflection piece, and really pushed my understanding of self and my understanding of myself within the context of my community. Um, so my story is not a sad one. My story is not a pity party. My story is, no, this person has a lot of people in their corner. Um, in real life and also on the other side. Like, I got my people, I got my spirit guide. Like, they're they're protecting me. Like, I feel divinely protected in those ways. Um, and so yeah, I've had to, relinquish both control and also people, um, when it comes to, you know, learning how to take care of me and learning how to be a human. You know, it can all feel really alien some days. Uh when you what sort of like when you convince yourself that you understand how a thing works, how you function in a day, and then have an experience, and you're like, everything crumbles after that, and you sort of have to, you know, parse together, like, okay, well, why did I respond in that way? Is this because of a past experience? How might I react differently? Things like that. Which, I'm not speaking in any specificities, but just all that to say, I'm in the very fortunate position to have who helped me
Well, excellent. I'm glad to hear that. And what do you think could be difficult in general for someone who feels I'm not being true to myself in some way, right? That they feel a little out of sorts. They can't quite name it yet. They kind of hear a whisper, but they can't quite name it yet. And they want to sort of move towards what that inner gut is saying is this is what I really want, this is what I really am. What do you think sometimes could cause that difficulty? I think especially because like, another reason why I want to speak to you is because I realize that a young adult or an early grown person is living in a very different world than I was living in. So I'm just curious about that thought process because I think a lot of people who like Gen Xers and above believe that we have made a lot more progress in a lot of areas in how to allow people to be themselves than we really have. So I wonder for the 30 somethings, 20 somethings, what might make it more challenging to truly, as you explore yourself, to move in this direction. Be like, I feel out of sort, and I know this is not quite who I am or what I want, but I'm not sure how to get there. What might make that difficult?
What might make it difficult?
Yeah, what might make it difficult? Yeah.
Not having representation around you to like sort of cue you in to being like, hey, this I'm a possibility model for potentially your life. I don't know if you've ever seen the or heard the the Broadway show Fun Home. It's about this lesbian cartoonist, and she sort of recounts her life, and the life of her father, who ends up also being gay or who is gay. Anyways, in one of the scenes, there's a song called "Ring of Keys," and in the scene, there is a delivery person who has a ring of keys, and she was like this butch lesbian, and this the main character is observing this butch lesbian from at the age of like 11. And she's observing her and she's like, there's something about you that I'm gravitating towards you. It might be your dungarees, your ring of keys, like whatever it is, but there's something that feels like something that I relate to. I don't have they didn't have the words for what it was. Um, and so I hope that, and I have seen for myself people who have been the ring of key moment for me. And I've noticed when children have observed me that I become a ring of key moment for them. And so just representation as best as possible, which can be difficult when you don't live, we live in such a bubble in New York City. I get to see people who, you know, are of so many different experiences and what a privilege to live in this place. And you know, it's the folks who don't get to have the tingle in the background because they don't get to see them. They have no possibility models. They have no mirrors to understanding that there is a reality outside of this male and female role or the gender roles within.
Mm, beautiful. Yeah, we are in a bubble, and I'm reminded of that often, especially in the madness that's happening outside the bubble, legislation wise, in so many areas. So I guess to just I guess wrap it up and make it even more complete with this particular conversation, what advice would you give then to let's say there is a 20-year-old future role who again, like you is saying, I kind of rejecting this box of femininity. I don't necessarily want to express myself in this way. I know I'm not really attracted to boys, kind of, but not sort of, but also kind of like those identify like, but they're in this place, but they don't have the great fortune of that you have and have people who have your back. Like I'm assuming that when you maybe if your mom did feel a way about you're not having your kids say, she was like, "Well, that's my child eventually, and just we just gonna roll with it. I'll give her a party for something, give them a party for something else, right?" Um, what about that 19 or 20-year-old who kinda is not required to follow the party line because they are quote unquote an adult. But I remember being 19 or 20 and I still very much felt the weight in the eyes of everybody on me and having to do certain things. So if you had any advice, because although you're still in your journey, you've come a long way from, definitely 15-year-old role in like feeling that you out of supposed to not knowing what it was. What kind of advice did you have for that person?
I think the advice I would give someone is it might sound so like what? But I honestly think it's gonna sound so cheesy, but it's like you gotta find your community, but you really do. Like whether it's on the internet, whether it's at a trivia night somewhere random, like finding your people um truly is so important if that's your vibe. Because obviously there are folks who like prefer the company of themselves and like that's their own separate journey. But for the folks who really do, seek community that they can there are so many forums to connect. There are so many people to meet. And even in communities where you think there is no one like me or no one in my similar, you know, identity, there is someone there. Because gay people, trans people exist everywhere.
Right.
And they have for forever.
Exactly.
Uh, and so really just leaning on the internet, maybe if that's your access point, um, to finding community. Um, if you're not able to do so in the physical, day to day.
Thank you. I think that that can cover so many instances of how to find peace and find your path. Again, community. Thank you so much. And you have quite a community and you're doing many, many amazing things. So tell us what you are working on to further expand the greatness that is Roll. Tell us where we can find you. Because yeah, you're doing some amazing things. I just want everyone to know about those things.
Thanks. Um, I am running excuse me, I'm a co-founder for Transformative Schools. We are an education-based nonprofit that centers trans joy and social justice. We run an after-school program for students 9 through 15, both in person and remote, Monday through Thursday. The in-person happens down in the West Village, and the remote obviously is remote, so that folks who don't have access to it um, um, can find their community there. So again, my work is bringing or creating spaces along with our my co-founder creating a space, co-creating a space with our youth um that allows them the freedoms to be, allows them freedom to think, question. I will say I always think about it in this way that I just so happen to be a non-binary student and a non-binary educator when I was an educator at a cis school, at cis schools, cis-centered schools. And so the school that the after school that we have um is working to be trans-centered in that same vein. But it is a place where all are welcome. Um and we also we plan to open up a physical brick and mortar school around 2025. Um, um, because we hope to be the response to all of the horrendous things that are continuing to happen to our trans and non-binary. Um, and we hope to continue to be a model for other schools to continue to implement ways to uplift the lives of our trans youth. Outside of that work, um, I am a children's book author. Back in October of 2023, I published my first book called Plátanos en Nuestro Patio. It is a story about uh, a child who goes to the Dominican Republic and experiences understanding how to learn about patience through the ripening of plátanos and also be waiting for a family member to come back. So if you want to learn more about transformative schools, you can follow at trans.formative schools uh, on Instagram. And also you can check out our website at transformativeschools.org. Um, for my book, Platanas en Nuestro Patio, it would be at stirredstories.com or on Amazon.
And I will put all of those links in the comments. Thank you so much, Ro. It has been a joy talking to you, and I appreciate the fact that your journey has been not necessarily easy, but also that you have been firm and clear in who you are. You've had support, so it's not a sad story. It is one of joy, and sounds like overall peace. And I am happy that that has been your story. And I cannot wait. I cannot wait. If I wasn't exhausted from teaching, I might put in an application. but my run in the classroom ended a few years ago. I was done. But I wish you absolute success, and I cannot wait to read your children's book. Super, super happy that you were here. Thank you so much for your time.